Mental health really is at the foundation of every decision, every thought process that comes into an individual's mind. So sound mind, sound me.
Hello, Red Cape Revolution. I am so glad to bring to you a special conversation today. A conversation about a topic that a lot of us have been talking about, a lot of us have been thinking about, a lot of us have been worrying about when we think about our colleagues and the folks in our world. But I'm pleased to introduce you today to a friend of mine, Colleen Saringer. We're going to talk about mental health, wellness. What is wellness, and what is a well mind today? And Colleen's going to share some ideas and things that how we can think about our own wellness, how we can think about in our companies, our mental wellness, and ways that maybe will surprise us and make us think differently about what's in our control and what's not. So, Colleen, welcome to Red Cape Revolution.
Thank you, Darcy. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So first, to start off, tell me a little bit about the work that you do, because you work with a lot of companies to really try to address some of these issues around wellness and how that affects productivity. But tell me more.
Yeah. So I'll just share just to help give a little credibility. So PhD by background, have been working in this corporate health and well-being space for over 20 plus years. So have seen a lot, but have also seen a lot of the same, which I think is okay. There's opportunity, for growth around, across the board. What we do is we basically look at a client's clinical data. We try to understand where are their opportunities based on what the data is telling us in regards to helping them then build back into strategy in order to bring, health, well-being, all of these initiatives to the workplace. But I think the other important thing is it's not just about data. I think oftentimes we do see our clients get stuck on the data piece, which is super important, that we are looking at that. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's just about being a good workplace and having a good culture. So those are also the things that we, again, take a step back, help our clients look at in order to then bring forth, build out strong strategies from an overarching standpoint within all aspects of the organization to hopefully help build a better culture and also, again, just put forth resources or whatever the case may be for employees to touch on to help better themselves.
So I'm curious, one of the things that you said was, and I have a dog in the background, so we're all talking about wellness, we're talking about all the different things that are going on, right? So including my Neff dog Hank, who wants to get part of the action. You said that you've been working on wellness programs for a long time, but sometimes they're not working. I think when a lot of us think about wellness, we think about the programs that companies put in place. We think about here's the pedometer, or here's the healthy snacks, but where are those working and where are they not working?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, the way that they work is if a company is willing to look at full organization-wide picture. So we cannot hang our hats on incentives. So dollars, whether it's premium reductions or additional dollars in a paycheck, we cannot hang our hats on incentives. We cannot hang our hats on things like pedometers. So I hate to call it tchotchkes, but they're tchotchkes, right? I've been around long enough that I think I've earned my stripes to say that. We can't hang our hats on those things. Those are quick pushes, right? Quick things that maybe will entice me. But if an individual and a company truly want to try to support behavior change, there are multiple components across the board that an organization has to be looking at in order for it to quote unquote work, if you will. And when we say work, we know that you can see dollars returned for dollars invested. We know we can see individuals staying at the workplace longer from a retention standpoint. We know it can benefit recruitment. But if you don't have that leadership support, and when I say leadership, I do not mean that the C-suite said, yes, go forth. I mean that the C-suite, the senior level managers, the managers that are touching the people on a day-to-day basis, they are invested. It's part of their goals, whether it be their division goals, whether it be their managerial goals. So we need to have that leadership support in place. We need to be looking at the environment of the workplace across the board. We need to be looking at policies. And when I say policies, I mean positive policies. So think about tobacco policies. That's a positive. Policies that encourage movement during the day. We need continued communication. We need a lot of things to be happening within the organization in order for them to be successful. And again, that can happen. It's work. It takes a lot of work for it to happen.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, again, the topic that we wanted to talk about more today was this issue of mental health. So, we've thrown the tchotchkes, as you will, at physical health. Whether or not it's moved the needle, whether it's not, it's paid off as much. What are we throwing at mental health, at mental wellness, or what's happening right now, and what's working and what's not?
Yeah. So, I know there's a lot of negatives that came out of COVID, but I think there's a lot of positives. And one of the positives is that it put a spotlight on mental health, a crisis that has been with us for a very long time. Excuse me, but COVID really put a spotlight, which a lot of companies have this renewed interest on, which I think is a huge benefit. However, what I think we need to do, and what we've been talking about to the clients that we work with, is that mental health really is at the foundation of every decision, every thought process that comes into an individual's mind. So sound mind, sound me, right? So now let's transfer that.
I want to underline that. Sound mind, sound me is what you said. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not easy, right? Because we all have, and we'll talk about this in a second, we all have something that sits underneath our foundation, or something that has built our foundation, if you will, in regards to how I then utilize and get in touch with my mind on a day-to-day basis. But I'll go back to what I was originally going to say in regards to the fact that I think the unfortunate thing is that in the workplace, we have siloed wellness. So we have siloed it into, again, one department doing all the work rather than an organization doing all the work. And we cannot silo any of it anymore. Going back to your question about success, right? And so that, to me, then loops us back around to the mental health piece in regards to myself. My mind is coming to work regardless if I'm sitting in the human resource department, if I'm standing on the manufacturing plant line, right? So it 100% has to be thought about across the board, and not the responsibility of one department, if you will. So without commitment from an organization to focus on mental health, I think we're going to still be having these conversations year over year over year, right? So that's one thing I think we're really trying to bring to the companies that we're talking about, is trying to help them understand that this has to 100% be looked at across the board, organization-wide, cannot be siloed out. The other thing is in regards to, so again, going back to things that I've experienced, maybe younger in my age, right, that impacts my sound mind. Because again, that's hard. That's a hard thing to back into, especially if when I was younger, maybe there was a mental health crisis in my family. So for example, maybe someone was struggling with the idea of suicide, right? And maybe I learned that as a young age, that family member was challenged. And then in addition to that, I learned, but we shouldn't talk about that. No one should know. So now I take that, and in my mind, I grow up and I think, ooh, we don't talk about mental health. We should be embarrassed. Something like that could ruin me. It could ruin my career. So now you take, as a growing adult, you put that individual in the workplace. And as we're trying to break down these barriers, we have big barriers to break down. We're trying to break down what someone was built upon. That's not easy. And so that is the other area that we're really trying to work with our clients to go back to the basics. And when I say basics, I'm talking about verbal communication, sharing personal stories. Those are the things that change individuals from a mental health standpoint, not another program in the workplace. It really comes down to some of the basics specific to communications and sharing.
So it's really interesting you say that, because it feels like that is at the hub of so many things. I talk to a lot of leaders and managers, and they want to retain people, and we talk a lot about what are the conversations to have, but what I hear you saying is that, creating those safe places to have conversations about anything, because I might have, I might come in with assumptions and beliefs of my own, but how do I know that I can talk about different things, and respecting that different people are coming from different areas. So, how do you recommend somebody? Let's say someone's a, a manager and they have a pretty big team, but how do they calibrate, like, what's an appropriate question and what's not, when you think about checking in on somebody? What's over the line? I think it's really
Yeah.
hard to tell.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so here's what I think we have to remember is we spend the majority of our waking hours at the workplace, which means we are in the presence of our coworkers, our colleagues, whatever word is utilized, more than we are our spouses, our significant others, our children. And so we know if someone looks different that day,
Mm.
if they're feeling different that day. And it is, to me, because I've seen this play out personally myself interacting with colleagues and with others interacting with each other. When you ask that question, and this is, to me, is how simple it can be. I think we've made this very convoluted, but as simple as it can be, and you're not crossing a line. When you ask someone, how are you this morning? It's not a glance over when they pause and say, I'm good. They're not good. Because you know how they've always responded to you the day before, the day before, the day before, because you've been with them long enough, right? And so to me, again, as simple as it is to say, are you sure? Is there something that you need to talk about? It can be that easy, but I think we have forgotten, at the end of the day, it's people talking to people.
Mhm,
And that's it. To me, that's not crossing a line, right? It's
mhm,
just
mhm,
respecting that you see what these day-to-day behaviors are. The other thing I think that's not, again, to me, this goes back to kind of signs to watch for is if you know that someone extended family member maybe just passed away, or if maybe you find out that they're going through a divorce or they're having a tough time with a child. Those are things that are going to kind of boil the water on the back end. And you can almost, I hate to use the word assume, but you can almost assume that something may come out on the other end that probably isn't the most positive for that individual. They're not going to be fully present. So those are just also, I think, things that managers can be listening for on the back end in order to know, hey, when there's a minute or two that individual is maybe off to the side filling up a water bottle or getting a coffee, that you can say, hey, I know it's none of my business, but I just want you to know we have an EAP resource, or if there's somebody that you need to talk to me, it's an easy, it doesn't have to be this big blown out deal.
mhm,
There's
mhm,
very easy, just person to person ways to do it.
mhm. One of the things that I've seen done effectively, when, because we all, none of us get here unscathed, right? That
Hmm.
we all have something going on, and it gets in our mental bandwidth. It's very hard just to separate anything. But is for the individual to be overt about what they want. It's like, yes, I have a cancer diagnosis, and I'm asking you, I would prefer not to talk about it. When I have something to share, I'll share it with you. And if something's getting in the way, then I want to know it. But other than that, like setting your rule book, if you will, or because I know that I've talked to people who have been, sick, or a family member's been sick, and it's exhausting to have to rehash it for everybody's curiosity. And but what you're saying, I think that is this challenge that we have of, we want to show people we care, but we don't want to cross that line. But I hear you saying, at least make the effort. Like, that's the piece, to just open up the dialogue, but you don't have to push it, but just make it safe to be able to do that.
That's 100% it, Darcy. I think,
Hmm.
yeah, to me, and that's, you make a great point, is they may not want to share. And so I think part of that verbal outreach is, hey, you may not feel comfortable enough and that's okay. You don't have to answer my question. You don't have to say anything else. I just want you to know
Mhm.
whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
And so it's a great point, because at the end of the day, individuals trust their managers more than they trust human resources, right? And that's not a bad thing. It's the way that the corporate world has been built. And so such a missed opportunity if we're not at least extending that.
Yeah. Well, and great advice for managers too. For me, hearing you say that, creates more business case to create space for managers to manage, leaders to lead, leading people, not leading projects, which is, something, I've talked about a lot with that. Our manager roles are so overwhelmed sometimes
Mhm.
that they're managing things and the people are going last on the list. But with what we're seeing now in the marketplace and seeing just in the world, that managing people, and managing doesn't mean telling them what to do, but just the kind of conversation you're talking about, that is a productivity measure. Going back to, you were talking earlier about looking at data and being able to say, how does all this help our work better as well as our lives work better?
Right, right. Agreed. 100%. I
Yeah.
think just one other thing I'd love to throw in there in regards to the managers, because again, it's such a, they're so crucial, and I want to just, I guess, give another suggestion as you were just sharing that, another suggestion in regards to how do I know that I'm not crossing the line, or maybe even if they're afraid to initially say the question of, I know you might be going through this, a way to do it more broadly that we talk about with our clients too is, if you have like traditional staff meetings or employee shift changes, those are perfect opportunities to give broad-based knowledge out delivery from a verbal standpoint.
Mhm.
Hey, just want to make sure you all know this is Mental Health Awareness Month. We have the EAP in place. We have, whatever it is, we have X policy in place. So that's a nice way to start, just on a weekly basis, a daily basis, because you just never know when it might catch the ear. And again, for
Mhm.
those that might be a little bit, kind of fearful that they might be crossing a line, what an easier place to start too. So I
Mhm.
wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, and even a great opportunity to reshape, the reminder of how you want to interact or not. So instead of just feeling like everybody has to go to the EAP, to say, here are things that please feel free to bring this to me. I may not have the answers, but maybe I can guide you someplace else.
Exactly.
And I think too, I've seen it work very effectively when people have said to themselves how the EAP has worked, because that sometimes seems like a black box,
Yes.
where I don't want to make that phone call because I don't know what system that puts me in and what list that puts me on. Maybe this is I'm reading too many mystery novels, but can
No.
you can you talk? Do you hear that in your work?
Yes, yes. The EAP is a challenge. Yes, uh, companies will always say to us that it has a stigma to the stigma, right? So there's already a stigma behind mental health, and now we put the EAP in front of it. And when we think about, sometimes the EAP is used for, sometimes it's used for correctional issues, right? So it's used for that. It's also then in turn used for, again, like substance abuse, or so it's already has a negative kind of connotation to it, just because of what it is surrounding it. And so we hear all the time about, I don't trust, I as an employee don't trust that once I get into that queue, that information isn't going to be shared. I think the important thing though to say is, it really is a smaller percentage across the board, right, of employees that have that, I think, kind of fear and concern. So we can't just remove them completely from an EAP standpoint. I think that they definitely serve a good role. Um, I think again, it's just a matter of trying to continuously educate, maybe helping an employee reach out to understand that their information is not going to be shared, by doing it with them. I think we
Mhm.
forget about that, right? Like, people are more willing to follow along if they have support. So just again, some of these easier, that I think it's getting so convoluted, that if we could just think about some of the basic things that make individuals want to use something that they were initially afraid of, is partnering up and doing it together, or sharing, hey, this is the report that we get. We have nothing, we see nothing in regards to your information. So it's building that confidence on the back end, because it's always going to be there and we hear it a lot.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If I'm a person in a power position, a leadership position, or in HR, to be able to say, here is the type of data we get. We get the numbers. We don't get the where they're from, or we don't get the, but the numbers know that, here are some of the things that come up. So that's normal. So use it for that. And I've also heard more people talking about, to your point about using existing meetings and points of communication to remind people that, in some cases, EAP might be accessible by the family too, or they may have other tools that aren't just for the person who, the person who's employed, but for that person's family network, which of course, as we think about having a sound mind, we all come to work with whatever is happening in our families,
Right.
with us.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. So I'm curious for you. So how, if someone is a leader or can advocate to their leaders for the types of support or tools or anything that people need to really help people feel more of sound mind, at their work, feel like they can do their best work, or, the language I use is they can work in your superpower space and, have a life at work that they love. What can people do to help increase that in their organization? What can they ask for of their leaders? What can they advocate for?
Yeah, so I like to take this back to a few, and I'm going to say this, and it's not going to be easy, right? But to me, it should be, but it might take a little bit of time. Is what we forget about at the end of the day is that employees, myself included, don't understand how their insurance works if they need to get help. So let's go down the path of answering this, if I need help, because that's what's creating the barrier, right? Is I need to take the step, but my goodness, I don't understand my insurance. So I'm going to start there, because that's going to play into navigating leave of absence, navigating, can I afford time off without pay? I mean, it's such a big, to me, again, I think these are basic, but they're big. So one, we have been really trying to push and encourage, write out how the mental health benefits work, more so than the chart you see during open enrollment of what the cost of coverage is, right? So really try to map that out, think just in regards to how does it work. The other thing is try to advocate, because that obviously requires some effort, right? Or partnership, leaders and human resources, or whoever's behind the medical plan. The other thing is leave of absence. So getting that written out, how does that work? What if I do go and say, hey, leader, hey, manager, I do need to take time off to check myself into a substance abuse center. I don't understand leave of absence. I mean, obviously I need to feel even safe enough to ask that question, right? So that's, again, that's a bigger, depending on the culture, but if that can be written out in black and white, when I look at our policies within my own workplace, I don't really understand it. And so to me, big opportunity across the board. In addition to leave of absence is my job safe or not? So that's a part of it, right? Because again, I may not be a person that can afford time off without pay. Right. And so how am I going to come back to a safe job or not? So to me, those are what I think should be easy, but I think getting that information spelled out might feel like a big undertaking. But if I was a leader who was going to advocate for what do we need to try to help our employees who are maybe ready, but they're scared because they don't know what the process is, we need to map out the process, and leaders can advocate for that. So if we stay on the line of an EAP per se, I think, one of the things that we forget is that just allowing people to use it during the workday, without penalizing their hours, right? For saying, hey, it's okay if you want to take a few minutes to go and make that phone call. That's a tough one, right, culturally, but I think that that's an important one. The other one that I'd love to talk about, if I could, is, again, when we think about individuals that are on an hourly salary rate, right? oftentimes the first place an individual will go to is their primary care provider, right? To say, hey, I need help. I don't know where to turn next, right? Well, if I'm an hourly employee and I try to take a day off, that means I don't get paid, right? So the other thing that we're really trying to push and try to talk about with our clients, which we've been for many years, I think the timing is just right again, is time with off pay to go see that doctor. So whether it's 4 hours of paid, whether it's 8 hours of paid, I mean those are policies, right, that can be put in within the workplace, so that that individual then can feel confident enough to go and at least start the conversation. And then the other one that I think is an important one, and again, this will start to shape the culture. I know we do this at my workplace, is one day of paid time off that is called mental health day, and it's not a part of the PTO pool or the days off pool. It's its own separate day. And so I think that that's another one to advocate for, internally for leaders.
Yeah. So, last question for you. You mentioned earlier that what you do with organizations is you look at the data. And I know there's been some conversation around, and you said this too, that, COVID has brought the mental health conversation up, but it isn't necessarily new. It's just louder. Is the data, when you are working with companies, when you're looking at, I assume, their medical claims and where they're spending money to get at that, is that reflecting the same things that we kind of feel like are going on in the world?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing higher medical claims from a depression standpoint, and then also from an anxiety standpoint. So 100% seeing that, and I wouldn't say that it's a huge spike. I think we're definitely seeing that uptick. Where I think we have to remember that they might be, and I don't want to use the word hidden as if they're not coming out as a medical claim, but hidden in the sense of a comorbidity standpoint. So if I'm an individual that has diabetes or heart disease, I most likely am suffering from depression as well. It's just one of those comorbid conditions, right, that comes with it, because maybe I have diabetes because I'm carrying extra weight and it doesn't feel good for me to walk. So now I'm sitting in my home. So again, all these things kind of play together. Very long-winded way, Darcy, to say yes, we are definitely seeing it align from a medical claim standpoint. But I think we just have to remember, we can't forget that there's some aspects of the data we're just never going to see, but that it comes along with these comorbid, or it comes along as a comorbid condition to many of these conditions that several.
And
people
so,
are showing.
so the thing that you're making me think about is that what I can change is my mind, right? That, like, maybe I'm not going to lose, 50 pounds in a one day of exercise, but being in control, being able to use some of these resources, or being able to just recognize that the sound mind is the basis of a lot of things, as opposed to, I think a lot of our attention has been on everything else and putting mental health in its own separate box. I hear you really saying it's the foundation of
Correct.
all the things we're doing. So,
Correct. Yep.
yeah.
You summarized it well.
Yeah, great. Well, this is an interesting conversation. It's really interesting to think about where we came from, and it influences our thoughts. And Colleen, where can people find out more about you? I know you do speaking and lunch and learns and different things for companies that want to understand more about this. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you, Darcy. Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. So Colleen, last name is spelled S like Sam, Aringer. That would be the best place to find me. Of course, I work for Alliant Employee Benefits, but yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest place.
Perfect. Great. Go out, connect with Colleen, ask her questions. Maybe she'll come and share some thoughts with your team, or just have other ideas as a manager. And you've given me ideas of other things that we can share with our managers here at Red Cape Revolution. So Colleen, thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks for helping us all kind of keep checking in our sound minds and have a great life at work. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.